Welcome to Wilder Wolves Hall of Fame Mode Fandom. My name is Wilder Adams, and this is today the first ever Wolves Fandom Friday series of all time. And what this basically is, everybody, is every single week I want three Timberwolves fans to come on the show, and we're just going to discuss some of the biggest topics that have happened in the Timberwolves community. I want this platform to be a Timberwolves fan-oriented community, and I hope that this episode that we'll be doing, hopefully every week, will be a step toward that direction. So the way every introduction is going to work, guys, I'll start with Troy here, but essentially you're going to introduce yourselves and just give us your Hall of Fame fan mode moment. And for everybody listening, a Hall of Fame fan mode moment is basically like if you're in a video game, there's rookie mode, there's pro mode, there's all-star mode, and there's Hall of Fame mode. And Hall of Fame mode is what it's like to be a Timberwolves fan. So that's what a Hall of Fame fan mode is. That's a lot of words right now. But all right, Troy, you can get started, man. How are you doing?
Hi, James. Hi, everyone. My name is Troy. I'm been a Wolves fan since around the 2011-12 season, I want to say. I really didn't start getting into the sport, I would say, until 5, 6 years ago, around the Jimmy Butler Cat era and then into the Ant era. So my Hall of Fame moment, I think, would have to be, there's an obvious moment in the Western Conference Finals Game 7, but I think the one that stood out to me personally was when they played their first playoff series against Memphis, and it was game one. And I was watching the game in Dallas because I just so happened to be in Dallas during that time and was at a bar. I remember this. And these two people were next to me, and they told me that they've been lifelong Wolves fans for a long time for some reason. They're from Texas. I don't know how that happens, but I watched the game with them and my dad at this bar, and then they won. And then it was like the most joyous celebration like ever, even though it was just game one against the Grizzlies. So even though like there's one obvious one that stood up above the rest, like that's one that stood out to me personally.
When you have like those one of us moments, when you find another Minnesotan in a different place, there's nothing like that. So that's awesome, Troy. Thank you for jumping on the show. And Brooks, tell us about yourself, my friend.
Yeah, so I've probably been a Timberwolves fan probably about since 2018. I tried to keep up with them a little bit before then, but it was kind of hard to given the roster. But 2018 is kind of when I really started, and then it's been a lot easier to be a bigger fan as we drafted Ant and everything. But I would probably say my Hall of Fame fan moment was the Western Conference Finals Game 3 this year. My dad got tickets for me and him out of the blue, and I had work the next morning at 6 a.m. So, driving from Iowa all the way to Minneapolis to go see that game, which we won by like 40, which was amazing. And then getting to work the next day after like 3 hours of sleep was probably like the one of the best moments of my life, just with my dad and just being in the arena at Target Center. The atmosphere was an insane environment. So I probably just have to say that.
That was a great moment. I was at that game as well. I think it was the Thunder game 3, right? Is that right?
Yep.
Yep,
Uh-huh.
OKC game 3, man. Yeah, that was
hmm
that was a crazy game. Funny story about that. Sam Presti was sitting right next to me at the game.
Oh, no way.
And yeah, he had a suit on. And it was the funniest thing because like I think it's like protocol for these Thunder people to not
hmm
say who they are. So when I asked him, "Are you Sam Presti?" and he says, "I'm not," I just said, "You know what? I'm just going to scream everything at the court that if he was Sam Presti, he would be upset by." So, so I was going to really verify his truth. So I was yelling stuff like I was calling Shea the worst MVP of all time. I yelled, I yelled, Oklahoma City is the most pathetic one seed ever. Who built this team? And like 10 minutes later, he left. He never came back. It was the funniest thing because he knew he blew his cover. So it was pretty good. That's
hmm
awesome, man. All right, James, we share the same first name, my guy. Tell me about yourself.
Yeah. Yep. Both two Jameses here, but yeah, I'm from Eden Prairie. I gotta say my fandom moment was probably game 6 Western Conference Finals last year against Denver. My buddy won tickets from work and I went with him, a longtime friend. And that game was kind of a blowout, but that was also like brink elimination. Like if we're gonna get eliminated, like I want to be here for it type thing. And or it wasn't Western Conference Finals, so second round. I think. But either way, that series alone, like I went to pretty much every single game, home game at least, and that series, that game just blew me out the water when we started getting after that run. We were down like 8 or 9 in the beginning,
Mm-hmm.
and then after that, we just fucking blew them out by like 20 or 30.
It's so funny. So when this team, whenever we expect them to zig, they zag. Isn't it? Isn't that like the most like real thing with the Timberwolves? You just if you expect them to do something, just expect them to do the complete other thing. They're going to win exactly when you think they're going to get killed. They're going to lose exactly when you think they're going to win. You know, somebody's going to show up when they're not supposed to, and vice versa. I mean, I think if I was gambling for the Minnesota Timberwolves, I'd be broke by now. So I'm not touching that. I'm not touching that. But I love it. Thank you all so much for jumping on. I'll give you guys a Hall of Fame fan mode moment for me. I gotta cut down the words on that, but it sounds good for now. So my Hall of Fame fan mode moment was I was at the draft party in 2019, and this was the Jared Culver draft. Okay, and I'm like, it's like this. It's a fun little event. Like Josh Okogie's at it, and it's a fun little team event. And I just remember I had the biggest distaste toward Jared Culver as a prospect. I just didn't like him as a player, and I was like watching the Final Four, like watching him stink against Michigan, and then go up against DeAndre Hunter and just be completely locked up. I was not a fan, and I was so set on Darius Garland. And then when Cleveland took Darius Garland, I was heartbroken. And then at pick 6, I was like, okay, so who's next? Like Kobe White, maybe? Who's next, right? I'm thinking of who's a good fit. And the moment they yelled Jared Culver, there was a wall next to me, and I actually punched the wall. And I literally sprained my wrist after the Jared Culver draft pick because I genuinely punched the wall good. And that I think that punch is justified because I was right on Jared Culver, but it was a situation. But yeah, so today we're just going to react to some of the biggest news in Timberwolves community. Of course, this week was really interesting because not only did we have the draft, which we'll start with, but we also had the approval of A-Rod and Mark Lowry as the official owners of the Minnesota Timberwolves. So we're going to cover that right away. So, hey, James, I want to ask you right away, 2025 NBA draft, Minnesota ends up with Johan Beringer and Roko Zikoski, 2 international bigs. What was your takeaway with this draft?
Berenger is interesting to me. His potential's through the roof with his defensive capabilities going forward. Like 5 to 3, like Tim was kind of saying, like switchability is going to be the big thing for him going forward. Like if he is able to switch and play drop at an elite level, especially learning from Rudy, like he has the potential to be something crazy. And Tim kind of hinted at it yesterday. He only played professional ball for 1 year. Like that's crazy to me. And his mobility, his hips, especially being a former striker, is crazy. He could turn into something special, but he could also just be another, I don't know, Jackson Hayes. Like at the end of the day, he's going to be pretty good, I think, though. Especially learning from Rudy. Like if there's any spot he's going to gain to his potential, it's probably with Minnesota. Zerkarski's interesting though. 7'4", 7'3", can dunk without jumping. They said, which is crazy. So if we could get him anywhere decent, maybe he could be a Wemby Chet stopper / maybe just Rob throw it up there and figure it out type thing. But I don't know how much potential he really has. But if he can develop it to like a backup 5 behind Behringer in the future, that would be pretty special.
Yeah, absolutely. Brooks, what was your takeaway?
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. This is when I first heard the pick, I was a little disappointed. But I think I was a little disappointed that Sorber got taken at 15, 2 picks before. But so yeah, not gonna lie, I was a little disappointed at first, but after I like really thought about it, I was like, this is honestly a great pick. An 18-year-old out of France playing in Slovenia. Like James said, former soccer player. That is the type of athletic skill that you gain athletic skills when you play other sports. And I think if you were to look at Rudy Gobert and then look at our pick, I think the difference is that Rudy looks like he probably didn't play soccer. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Rudy looks a little bit more stiff. Young looks a little more fluid, and I think that will definitely translate a little bit more to the NBA. And I think one thing I really liked about him coming out of the European leagues, those are really physical leagues. Those are really mature leagues. You got a bunch of former NCAA players, you got former NBA players who didn't, work out in NBA who end up overseas. So I think it's great that he was picked out of that league because I think he's going to be able to match the physicality. The tone has been set. So I
Mhm.
think as time goes on and he develops, I think he's going to end up being a great pick. I think his floor is really high. It's interesting to see how high his ceiling is, but I think his baseline floor is going to be amazing. And then with Rocco, I just think that one's really interesting. I think picking Fleming would have been cool. But,
Mm.
I think also getting that value and trading back is even better. I think he's really interesting. I think he's going to be somebody who needs time to develop, and he's going to have to find some sort of ability in his game that makes it so you have to play him. Obviously, being 7'3" is like uh, something that will put you on the floor,
Not
but
bad.
yeah, it's not bad. So I think he's going to have to develop some other skill that puts him on the court, but. I think it's really interesting. I think these are two great picks for the long-term vision of the team. We kind of have some question marks at the 4 and 5. We don't really have any question marks from 1 through 3. We got TSJ, we got DiVincenzo, obviously Ant, we got Rob. Um, so we have depth there, but I think the one thing we didn't really have on our team was depth at the 4 and 5. So I think it, ultimately fills these holes. So I'm pretty happy with it in hindsight. A little disappointment at first, but after really thinking about it, I think it was some great picks.
Yeah, I think a lot of Wolves fans wanted Burring or wanted Sorber.
Hmm.
He was definitely the Timberwolves Twitter fan favorite throughout the draft process. And
Hmm.
yeah, 2 7-footers. Troy, what was your takeaway?
Yeah, like a lot of people, I was a little bit kind of caught off guard by Behringer. Honestly, he's somebody that I've never really heard his name before the draft process. But looking into it, he's only 18 years old, and that's intriguing to me in the middle of the first round. And the fact that that Tim Connelly wanted this guy, this was their guy all along, was interesting as well. And at being only 18 years old, this guy has a lot of time to develop. He doesn't have to play right away, like Brock. Both of them really don't have to play immediately. Like, these are guys that you're waiting and seeing. You're letting develop in the background. Maybe they get a couple minutes in the regular season, like Rob did. You kind of just ease them into playing time, and if they play well on the floor, like a TSJ does, that enough that he gets playoff rotation minutes, like fine enough, like fair enough, like yeah, you can keep this guy on the floor and get him to develop more. And like maybe he's best case scenario, your backup five still when Rudy's in his prime. But like at the moment he's 18 years old. Like I can't really expect him to do much this year, maybe even this upcoming season, and maybe even the next year. But like this is something that you're going to keep on the background. You're going to let him develop, kind of like in a sense like a Leonard Miller, except that like this is a first round pick. Like you're going to pay a little bit more attention to him. So I'm this pick is growing on me slowly. I didn't like initially trading down from 31 and then trading down from 35, but they got the value they wanted, and Rocco was an interesting pick for a late second rounder. Standing at 7'3", he could be something. It's a late second rounder, so you can only expect so much. But he's 7'3", and that's gonna keep some eyes on you in the background while you develop. So yeah, like you guys said, like they don't really have young depth at the 4 and 5, so this prioritizes that position. I still think looking forward to the offseason, the Wolves still need to look for some sort of starting point guard to replace Mike, to help ease Rob in. But yeah, I think this was a good draft so far for a team that should be still contending for a top 5 seed in the West next year.
What is a good point guard idea that you have, Troy. And you guys want to mention, everybody can mention any point guard that would really like Minnesota to acquire this summer.
Not a I. There's Tyus Jones talks, and I really don't get the like for Tyus Jones. Besides that, he's a Minnesota guy. He wasn't necessarily great this past season, and um, the dream for me is Darius Garland, but Cleveland's not going to move. I don't think Cleveland's going to move on from him. So if you go into next season with Mike as your starting point guard, that's not the end of the world. But we saw this year that Mike was kind of just there on the floor most parts of last year, especially in the playoffs. So at some point you have to find some sort of solution there. If Rob's not entirely ready, like he showed last year on the floor in his very small stints on the floor. So Garland is the dream for me. If Jones is what they are looking at, I'm not going to be against it, but I'm going to be a little bit more cautiously optimistic if they do get him.
Yeah, absolutely. And guys, I love the point you made about the Tyus Jones thing. I think we all love Minnesota. We love Tyus Jones. Anybody who's one of us, we're just going to ride till the grave.
Well, I'm going to go ahead and completely counter those two players. I'm going to go ahead and say Kobe White. I would love to have Kobe White in Minnesota. I think Kobe White is somebody who is a good short-term option and also a good long-term option. Let's say we trade for Kobe White. He plays mediocre. Rob continues to develop. I think in like a year or two, it's not ridiculous to say that Rob could start over Kobe White if Kobe White did happen to be on our team. Another thing, too, let's say Rob doesn't develop like we want him to. We have Kobe White on the team. Let's say Kobe White takes a step or two. Realistically, Kobe White is somebody who's not going to be making a super max contract like Anthony Edwards. So I think that gives us a lot of flexibility financially because one, Kobe White's not somebody who's going to be a big chunk of the payroll, and two, I think it's like whatever contract he's on, I think it's going to be really high value, and I think he's going to be just as tradable in 2 or 3 years. Like, you know what I mean? I think he's going to be somebody who's an asset, whether it's on the court or in the trade market. So
I love the Kobe White shout out. I think having a dynamic scoring guard next to Anthony Edwards, I'm totally with that. What do you think, James?
Well, I'm going to go with the other Chicago point guard for me, Lonzo Ball. I really think having a one that can sit down, if he's healthy, obviously, his knee, we'll see. But he was a good 3-point shooter when he was healthy. He can still get up when he's healthy. I saw a couple highlights of him dunking last year. I think we need somebody who can really get everybody involved because I know Ant loves just to go at whoever's in front of him and not really make as much as he should be, obviously. But if he's able to kick it out to Alonzo or somebody who is like a 3-and-D point guard who can really I'm gonna be able to switch instead of having Mike Conley getting attacked by Shea. It's Lonzo Ball, and I'll feel a little bit more comfortable with that. But yeah, I think Lonzo would be the one for me, especially since I think Mike Conley going forward really got put into this weird role, and I think that also affected him, not just him being older, but the role they put him in was more like an off-ball guard instead of just set up the offense and really get a play going. And that was a big thing for Mike. And hopefully he could come off the bench and do that. I think that would be really beneficial for him to have the bench unit and really instruct them. But yeah, I think Lonzo would be it for me, especially since I think he could throw a lob to Rudy whenever he's clapping under the rim instead of throwing it at his chest or a little bit lower and then he drops the ball. Then we're complaining about him dropping it.
Yeah, I love the different variety of guards that we mentioned because I think a big conversation is what type of guard you want next to an Anthony Edwards, right? We saw the efficient, steady playmaking point guard next to Anthony Edwards for the past couple years, and that seemed to really work. Minnesota's won they've made back-to-back conference finals with that type of point guard, even Mike Conley falling back, and then you kind of look back and say, well, it would be cool to have another guy who could put the ball to the teeth of the defense off the dribble, which we really haven't had in the Anthony Edwards tenure either. So I think is interesting. Another name I'll be really happy about is Colin Sexton. just because I just think a player like that, if you put him on a contender, his reputation will completely change because he's such an intense player. He's so physical, has so much length. I think his defensive reputation would elevate in a Minnesota context because he isn't known to be a great defender, but he wants to defend and he has the tools to do so. He can also give you a bucket. He's averaged 24 points per game in the NBA before, so he can give you a bucket. He can lock you down. He's another really good option. But yeah, I totally agree with you guys' point guard conversation. It's going to be a big deal this offseason. And the question for me, you guys can answer this if you want. What level of point guard is too much for this team? And that might sound really stupid, right? If you get a De'Aaron Fox level player, that's cool. But you want to develop Rob Dillingham. Matt Lloyd has talked about his optimism for Rob Dillingham, and Tim Connolly built on that last night in his post-draft interviews. Is it a worrisome concept to keep Rob Dillingham and then get a borderline star level point guard? Is it better to bet on Dillingham's upside and get kind of a bridge point guard like we're talking about with a Sexton or a White? What do you guys think in terms of, is it better to go for a star level guard if possible, or just a good bridge guard who can help Rob Dillingham elevate rather than get in the way? I'll ask Brooks first.
Well, I'm going to go ahead and say bridge point guard. I think when you get into the whole financial situation of it, a star point guard is going to cost a lot of money. And we've already seen teams throughout the NBA, like the Celtics, be super, super wary of that second apron and even the first apron. You know what I mean? So I think financially it makes sense to have a bridge point guard. So Rob can, still develop and still get some playing time. And I also think it allows Ant to take more of a playmaking leap. You know what I mean? If you get a point guard who can completely run the offense, I mean, yeah, that's great, and that would be great for Ant. But I also think it's not horrible for Ant to take on some of this playmaking burden, you could call it. I think throughout the playoffs, he showed a lot of promise making the right decisions, and I think he's only going to have chances to build on that. So I think if you have a bridge type of point guard that comes in, yeah, they can run the offense. Yeah, they can make decisions. But if the ball's not in their hands all the time, that's not a bad thing because we still have Ant. And I think Ant can take those leaps. So that's why I'm more so inclined to go with a bridge guard because also it's going to cost less with trade value. So I don't know. I'm going bridge guard for sure, though.
Yeah, like taking upon that bridge point guard point, Rob Dillingham's 20 years old right now. If I'm the Wolves into his rookie contract, say like I would ideally want him to start around 22, 23 years old. Colin Sexton, if we trade for him now, he's 26 years old. So I'm looking for a point guard around that age range, I would say, or even a De'Aaron Fox. Obviously, that wouldn't be a bad idea at all. But if you're talking about Rob Dillingham from this perspective, I really would want him to start sooner rather than later, and that's in about a year or two. So a guy like Sexton would fill that role. He would keep the Wolves starting five ticking. I think they would be a top 4 team in the West if they made a move like that. So the Wolves, I think, should really emphasize, okay, like I'm looking at Rob Dillingham's timeline. Like, when do I think he's ready to play like 29, 30 minutes a night? So I think Sexton should be like the point guard where like he's good, but like he's not quite elite at that elite level yet, like enough so that you can still emphasize Rob's development. So I'm looking for around a point guard around that age range, 26, 28 years old, that starting caliber, that is not going to entirely take away Rob's development. You can still play him, and if he plays really well, like you can maybe potentially flip that point guard you start like a Sexton later on.
Yeah, I think that would be the baseline of where you want to be. I do think getting a star point guard wouldn't be the worst thing in the world because at the end of the day, value is value, and if you could get a guy who's maybe on an expiring deal, maybe on a 1 or 2 year deal that does still allow Rob to develop behind. And remember, in college, he did win 6th man of the year for college. Like he has played that role before. He's not unfamiliar with that role. And especially if he could find a spot where he's comfortable, maybe it'd be like a 6th man type. But I think for value, like at De'Aaron Fox, I wouldn't want De'Aaron me personally, I don't think that fit is there, especially since he drives to the rim, Ant drives to the rim. But a star level point guard wouldn't be bad, especially for value purposes. Because if you are just under the second apron and you have value at with a star point guard, uh, and you could move on eventually, you could always get assets. Assets are king. I mean, we saw that last night with us trading down. They wanted more assets to trade in the future, and I think I think going forward that's probably what they're leaning into.
Tim Connolly has shown he is not afraid to make a swing. We've seen that
Yeah.
countless times before. And the one thing I think about, if it isn't a Colin Sexton or a Kobe White or Alonzo, and they somehow got to De'Aaron Fox in some scenario, I feel like at least a couple of their moves on the roster need to be made, not only financially, but I don't know, Randall, McDaniels, and Fox in the same starting lineup. That doesn't seem like it makes a lot of sense. Like Sexton's plug and play next to those guys. I think Kobe White's plug and play next to those guys. They can space the floor, a little less maintenance. Lonzo Ball definitely just because he doesn't want to be the scorer. So those are big questions with the point guard spot. And yeah, so the last part of the show, I want to transition and talk about the brand new owners officially, because I think we've gone through a lot of confusion, stress, the whole 9 yards with just what is the status of this ownership situation. And now we know who the owners are going forward. And I think it's the result most of us wanted, right? We wanted A-Rod and Lori to win the settlement. So I'm going to start with James on this one. What what are your just biggest wishes that you want A-Rod and Lori to bring to this franchise?
21 in the rafters. That's the first thing they need to do. But going forward, I think they've already pretty much stated, hey, we're going to keep the team here. They've reiterated that over and over and over again. So hopefully they ain't lying to us. But I think 21 in the rafters, and then probably a new arena needs to happen. We're Target Center. I love Target Center, me personally. But if you can maybe get a new arena, especially since they were talking about they want to set the bar for a new arena, which is crazy because the Clippers just got their new $2 billion arena, that which is kind of wild.
Mhm.
But I think they've already kind of been in this role pretty much. Like they already got Tim. They've already kind of had an impact on ownership decisions. So I think 21 in the rafters for me is just they have to do that. They have to.
Agreed. What do you
Yeah,
think?
everything starts with this ownership, with KG getting formally his number in the rafters. I mean, this is a franchise that only has one number retired at the moment, and they don't even have the number of their greatest ever player retired. So that's obviously the first thing that everyone should be focused on. And really, I think with this new ownership, it's just respectability. I mean, I think Lauren Rodriguez have already made a really big impression on the fan base, and with other fans as well. Like that's the name. There, of course, there's already name brand value, but A-Rod's a character, and maybe his baseball career is a little tainted, but he's a great personality, and I think as an owner, he's shown that he's loved this franchise, and so is Lore. So it's the fact that like both of them already love this franchise, and they already have gone out and said we're not moving the team. Like that's great, and they really care about what this fan base wants, and I think they're going to bring what this fan base really needs. So I've sung my praise for them since the owners since they unofficially became the new owners. Now that they're officially the new owners, I'm really excited to see what they do.
Yeah, one thing for me that I really appreciate about these new owners, and especially with A-Rod, is the fact that he's a former professional athlete. I think A-Rod probably has a pretty good understanding of what a championship level organization is made of and what it takes to compete at a high level. So I think one of the big things from that is just taking what he knows about what success is and implementing it into the Timberwolves organization, who has not seen much success throughout their existence. Um, Obviously, I'm going to go and agree with you guys with retiring number 21. But I think if they do that, they should also give him a statue too. But that's a whole other thing. And then also, I think one thing I'd really like to see out of these new owners is maximizing Ant in Minnesota. We all know the type of player Ant is. We all know who he could be. What I think one of their main priorities should be is keeping Ant in Minnesota as long as they can, whether that's his entire career, whether that's um, 10 years down the line and he wants to go and then let him go. But I think whatever they can do to keep Ant happy should be their first priority.
I love all those points. And these new owners, I think so far they've gone about it the right way. They first initially reiterated, we're not moving out of Minnesota. That's not the concern, right? I'm sure you guys remember some of the other camps that were in the negotiations with the Timberwolves in early 2020. Forgot which, I think it was, who was it? There was a player who had a camp and he tried to move the team to Vegas. And A-Rod and Lori, I'll give Glenn Taylor this credit. He did not want the team to move out of Minnesota. And the moment anybody talked about that possibility, he cut them out. So if we can appreciate Glenn Taylor for one thing, he kept the team in Minnesota. It took some torture while it was in Minnesota for it to happen, but it was still in Minnesota. So that's a big thing. And I really love the vibes that he's bringing to the franchise, A-Rod and Lori. I know you can't quantify that, but before they came here, it just felt like a very stale, outdated franchise with the way everything was operated. The stadium, it's going to get work. It needs work really badly, but it's one of the most rundown stadiums in the NBA. It's old. It's too tight in certain areas around the court between the fans and players. In the locker room, it has a reputation for being underdone, too tight, things that can't be acceptable for an NBA franchise that wants to be held like a top percentile organization going forward. So that's gonna be number one. And just number two, I really want to see the perception of this franchise change. I think a lot of the points you guys mentioned are huge steps toward the perception change, but this franchise has always been a little outdated. It's been a little outdated with when they make renovations to the stadium, to the way just the fan experience is. It's always been a little outdated, and it feels like they're making steps toward making it like fun and modern. And I think A-Rod and Lori want to bring that, and I hope a new stadium brings that. It's going to be very interesting to see just what changes you make. I totally agree with you, Brooks, the Anthony Edwards window. Like, if you really want to change the image, Anthony Edwards needs to be here to make those changes visible.
Mhm.
So that's a really big thing for me. So I totally agree. And to close off the show, I'm really curious. What do you guys think immediate changes could be made, like going forward with the team, or not even just like changes, like there's something wrong with the team, but evolution? What do you think the next evolution step is with the team starting as early as next year? I'll start with James on this one, if he's cool with that.
Yeah, an immediate change to the team would be uh, that's tough for me. I would say that the most crucial thing for I'll just say we'll go roster here because I think the organization that's going to take time. I think that's going to be a couple years out with a rebrand and stuff like that. But
Rebranding.
for the
Okay.
yeah, rebrand is eventually coming. I think they're going to do, especially since I heard they're bringing back these this year and the trees. That only makes sense. I think they're going out with their best and then they're going to rebrand. That's probably what's going to happen. Uh, but I would say for the roster immediately, the point guard. I think Finch is still too tied to Mike Conley. We'll see what happens with that. I mean, especially since we didn't put Dante in the starting lineup in the playoffs, so that kind of tells me a lot. Uh, but I would say for the roster, it's just we need a bridge point guard. We really do. Especially and with the Durant talks with Randall and Rudy kind of being in those, so that kind of tells you like they might make a switch up there in the future. So that's something to keep an eye on. But for sure, a bridge point guard for the roster and for the franchise as a whole, a rebrand because I own a lot of jerseys. I don't own the base white and blue jerseys.
I want those too. What do you think, Troy?
Yeah, one thing I want this to change is that we're not seen as tech statistically we're still like probably the worst franchise in the NBA. That should change in a couple of years. Like I don't want to be seen as like the team that like finally rose from the ashes. No, like this is a team that's here to stay. This is a team that's going to contend as long as Anthony Edwards is here. Like you're going to be a top four team in the Western Conference, and then if you move out east, maybe you're a top three team there. Like this is a team that should stay at the top, and in the next 10 years or so, I hope we win a title. I don't know if that will happen, but like in this, there's a window, and in 10 years, like a title isn't that isn't a ridiculous ask when you have a player like Edwards. So, I hope that like that happens and it can finally bring like this big deal to the city, and not we can't be and just not even with the Wolves, but just as with Minnesota as a city as a whole. Like it's not the most depressing city in the sports city in America anymore. Like this is a city where their basketball team that was so bad for years finally won a title, and that's awesome.
One thing for me that I'd like to see change with the team is I'd like to see some efficiency getting out in transition. I think this year when we saw the Pacers go on their run, I think one of the big things that they did really well was maximizing their points in transition. And being able to play at a high level and fast pace a game. I think that worked really well for the Pacers. So I know it's kind of hard with Rudy Gobert on our lineup to really get out in transition and be efficient. But I think we still got players like Naz Reid. Anthony Edwards is obviously a very high caliber athlete who can get out fast, and I think Colin Sexton would be great to have somebody else who can get out fast too. So I think maximizing transition, because if we can't get our easy points, then we're not gonna be able to stay in games. So I think going forward, efficiency on the transition, and another thing too with like what OKC did is being really well set up in the half court too. So I think if you do those two things, I think you're set up pretty well. And I think it'll transition to long-term success for the team, build an identity around those things, and I think we'll be set up for success for a while.
It looked like you can tell me if I misread this, James, but it seemed like you had something you wanted to build on that.
Yeah, I did. I think that's what the young rookie squad, we could call it, with Rob, Clark, TJ, Leonard, and they kind of touched on this. They have a starting five of young guys, and all of those guys play in transition. Rob, especially TJ, we saw that in the playoffs. We know he loves to get out and run, but Behringer likes to run too. I saw a couple clips of him getting in transition. I think we have the young pieces to actually get in transition. And I think that's what kind of their goal has been, slowly building up. The only one in that young squad that really might not is Clark, but I mean, if you have 4 out of 5 like guys, 4 out of whatever guys that could run a transition, I think they're leaning into that going forward. First starting lineup probably is never going to get in transition. Randall and Rudy
Never.
I just don't see those guys running. Jaden can run a little, but yeah, Mike Conley ain't gonna run.
Conley going back to 2013, Conley just blowing by people. Mike Conley was the first NBA game I ever watched, by the way. Just random fact. It was a Grizzlies Spurs game. He was a young point guard at the time, and it was like early stage Marc Gasol, Conley, and the big dragon with Tim Duncan and Tony Parker, Manu Ginobili. I had no idea what was going on. Now I just know it was Mike Conley. So you know what? It's only right he finishes his career where the basketball world started. And I think you guys all made really good points. I think the transitions will be a big deal. It does seem like Minnesota is really emphasizing that in the next Anthony Edwards window. It feels like it's an interesting philosophy. Minnesota's playing slower now. Anthony Edwards is getting more fine-tuned with his half-court just polish. And then over time, we're kind of going to go back to that fast and pace and intensity, the length, the defense, and the championship aspirations. I think there's a chance. It did kind of hurt me seeing OKC up there, with how many flops they did. And also, just speaking of flops, man, Is it politically incorrect? I just say, you know what, refs, just be better next year as the immediate change. Is that the politically incorrect answer?
It's not ridiculous to say that. It's
not
not
ridiculous.
ridiculous.
It's not ridiculous to say that. That's my number one thing, but I know you can't really change that. Finchy did say, basically, Anthony Edwards got to work on his flopping. I'm not sure if you remember that.
Yeah, he better not. No, I don't want to
I'm not
watch
gonna
that.
lie, that'd be an elite next step. I'm not gonna lie, that'd probably give us a couple
That
more
is that.
wins. It
Yeah,
really
if he wants to
would,
win
but
MVP, he has to do that. Obviously,
Yeah,
there's proof.
37. No, absolutely. I think in reality, I love the KG point. I think it'd be so cool if it was like one of the throwback jersey nights, and that night is when KG goes in the rafters. That'd be so cool.
oof.
So that's what I'm kind of
Versus the
hoping.
Celtics.
Versus Celtics.
Ooh.
That's like awkward X.
Hey, we could go the Nets.
Yeah,
That'd be
let's
good.
do an XVP.
People are going to be playing that Brooklyn Nets meme all night.
Oh my God. Poor Brooklyn. But yeah, that is a good way to end the first ever Wolves Fandom Friday episode of Wilder Wolves. Brooks, James, Troy, thank you guys so much for jumping on and being the first ever Timberwolves fans on the show. This is so fun.
Thanks for
We
having
appreciate
us.
it.
Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. And we're going to have more Wolves Fandom Friday episodes. I'm aiming for every single week. If there's an exception, I'll let everybody know if there's like 1 week that it doesn't work out. But that's the plan every single weekend, even throughout the weekend. We'll keep doing that. And free agency starting next week, I believe. And we're just getting to the thick of the offseason. Summer League, I'm just going to say this right now. Zakarski and Berenjay catching alley-oops from Rob Dillingham. That's a dirty thought. Oh, my God. That's nasty. So it's like, I think Berenjay, and by the way, Berenjay and Zakarskis will be the Giannis and Brooke Lopez of Summer League. Calling it right now. But all right. Thank you guys so much. This is Wilder Wolves Hall of Fame Mode Fandom.